So there it is, the first start. A couple of problems eradicated fairly easily, and now it's a runner, which means I can put it together now, knowing that it'll run when it's together. So the first thing I'm going to do is adjust the rear chain and make sure that wheel is locked up in the right place. Brake pads been fitted, caliper is on. So get all that adjusted. Brand new tyre on the back, look. Get the chain adjusted, and then I can fit the rear brake master, bleed the rear brake, and then basically the rear end is complete. Adjusting the rear chain. Now you have to look at the chain in this area here. This is where you measure the slack. Now the thing to do is to rotate the wheel and check the slack in several places. If the slack is pretty much the same in all places, it means the chain is probably fairly new and it hasn't worn that much. If a chain's worn, you'll probably find some places are really tight and other places are really loose. Another way of working out what a chain's like is get hold of the links here and pulling it off the sprocket. If it's worn, it'll come off the sprocket. If it doesn't come off the sprocket, it's probably not worn. Now this chain on this bike is fairly new. It doesn't look it, but it is fairly new. There's no wear on it at all. Now to adjust a chain on these particular bikes, the swinging arm has marks, and notice at the top of the washer there's a little dent. Now what you're supposed to do is adjust the chain and make sure that that mark is in the same place on this side as what it is on the other side. If you don't, the wheel will be twisted and then you'll have a steering effect from the rear wheel. See, look, there's the other side, and we use these adjusters to pull the spindle back. Whenever you're doing it, always make sure that the wheel spindle is loose, and loosen that nut there on the caliper so that the caliper can actually swivel, because otherwise it'll be tough and it won't swivel back. Don't undo it a lot, just undo it a little tiny bit. And that way then you can bring the wheel back, adjusting the chain each time, checking it throughout its entire range until eventually you'll get it at the right deployment. So what we have to do now is look in the book to find out what is the manufacturer's recommendation for chain deflection on this particular bike. The book states 20 to 30 mil in the middle. So this is the middle. And what you do, look at the middle of the chain, push it up, push it down, and look at the difference. Well, that's 30. Roughly, that's 80, roughly, so it's about 50. So obviously it's slack at the moment, and you check that in several different places to see if there's a particularly tight spot or a particularly loose spot, and you keep checking until you get a basic understanding of the condition of your chain. If it's massively different, just put a new chain on it. Now it sounds a lot, but to be honest with you, it's cheaper putting a new chain on than what it is to replace worn items afterwards. Gearbox bearings, sprockets, it's a nightmare. So put a new chain on it when it needs it. Now this chain is fairly evenly worn, so it's fairly new. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to adjust these end screws and pull it back until I get between 20 and 30 in this area here. Then we'll know that it's correctly adjusted. So you adjust these nuts, 12mm on this particular bike, and you adjust them, and you'll notice the chain begins to tighten up. But you must take notice of where these markers are on both sides. The wheel's coming back quite nicely. We can continue to check the amount of play. 2 to 6, so that's 4. 2 to 6, so that's 40. So a little tiny bit more. 2 to 55. 2, so that's 35. So it's 20 to 30. I'm only adjusting this one side at the moment, I know, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to get it roughly close, and then I'm going to look at the other side and then adjust it accordingly, and then do the final fine adjustment. 20, 50, 20, 50, that's 30. Right, so that's 30. Let's go and look at where the studs are, the markings. So that one there, look, is 4 studs in, or 4 marks in. Where's this one? This one, difficult to see, but it is just very, very slightly past it. Very slightly. Adjust accordingly. Check the chain tension until we get the correct tension and dead even markings. Once that's achieved, we can then give the wheel a bit of a tap just to make sure that both these adjusters are actually nicely home, and then lock it up. Once it's locked up, check the chain tension again, because sometimes it does move. Make sure these are tight, they're not slack and bouncing around, and then basically you've adjusted the chain. Right, so now we've adjusted it, so we've got in exactly the right position, both sides. We've done this nut up tight, and now we spin the wheel, and then you check the tension of the chain to make sure it's still within limits. Double check to make sure that that is the same on the other side, and then go round and tighten everything up that you undid, and then you have adjusted the chain. Ka-ching.